Welcome to our webinar today, Leading and Enabling Change.
Good afternoon, my name's Donna Unit. I'm Chair of the Enabling Change SIG, sponsoring this webinar today. Our mission really is to improve change capability of organisations, teams and individuals. Campbell's going to be presenting on leading successful change with a focus on leadership and culture. So I'll hand over to Campbell Macpherson for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking some time over your lunch period to be with us today. My name is Campbell Macpherson. I'll be leading this discussion over the next 3/4 of an hour, and then we're going to have 10 minutes of formal Q&A. But as Sarah said, any questions you have, jot them down, and that we don't get to, and submit them, because happy to answer them after the event. What I want to do for the next few minutes is just to introduce who the dickens I am and why I'm talking to you today. Hopefully everyone can continue to see the screen here. I'm going to be running through here. Here's a wonderful list of logos of organizations that I have worked with over the past. My whole career, actually list of careers, the thread that has run through it has been change. I started off almost like another lifetime ago in accidentally joining the Royal Australian Air Force. As you can tell, I'm an anglicised Australian, been here for 22 years. And accidentally joining the Air Force from school, where I did a degree and still hold the record for being the worst pilot ever to make it through to jets. So I learned a lot from that, and that was that you can't be good at everything. I then ran through changes run through my whole career. I was in Anderson Consulting in the change division of that 25 years ago, which is where I first met change as a discipline, and frankly became obsessed with it for the next 1/4 of a century. I have been the head of e-business for the AMP Insurance Group. I've been marketing director, the founding marketing director of Virgin Wines. I was HR director of a 1,000-person financial services organization in the UK. As you can tell, my list of careers is a bit bonkers. I then went on to be strategy director of Zurich emerging markets, and then even spent 3 years in the Middle East, helping one of their largest sovereign wealth funds with strategic change. So a number of the organizations you see in these logos are clients that I've worked with, helping CEOs and leaders to instigate change. And that's really what I do through my business. Now, please swamp yourself in this, or dive into and enjoy this website. It's my advisory website, changeandstrategy.com. There's lots of videos, lots of downloads, quite a few articles that you find on the front page. So what I do is I help CEOs and leaders to align their people to a clear strategy and then lead the delivery of sustainable change. And that's about building a culture that embraces change. And more importantly, or just as importantly, is helping leaders to achieve the almost impossible, and that's lead successful and sustainable change. I've written 2 books and I run workshops based on that. My first book was the 2018 Business Book of the Year, which floored me. It was the first book I'd written. It's called The Change Catalyst. It's about leading change. If the leaders in the organizations that you work for need, and leaders throughout the organization. My theory, or my belief, is there are change leaders at every level of the organization. So it's not just the leadership team that leads change. That happens throughout an organization. Please have a look at this book. It's all about leading change. The second book, which was just out last year by Kogan Page, is about embracing personal change. So it's the yin to the change catalyst yang, and the power to change is what I base several of my workshops on, as well as the change catalyst. So they're the 2 books that I've written that I do base my workshops on. Now, why am I doing this for you? One is that I really want to impart, I'm passionate about this, and I want to improve the ability of leaders across the world to lead change, and the ability of people to embrace change. Because if you don't actually have a culture that is ready, willing, and able to change, then nothing will happen. So what I'm wanting to do is, together, I think we can change the way that leaders lead and change the way that people embrace change. Have a look at the workshops on the website. These are the workshops and programs that I run. Happy to talk to you individually offline about how we can help your clients or your employers to do this. So today we're going to run through a bunch of really telling, pertinent, and changes of the essence at the moment. So, and all relevant stuff. So firstly, we're going to have a discussion on Slido about what have we learned about our ability to lead and cope with change during these last 12 months, which have been tumultuous change, the amount of change we've all coped with at work and in life and at home, and the two have come together. I'm going to ask you in a second to log on to Slido and talk to one another about what have we learned about our ability to lead and cope with change during these tumultuous 12 months, which has just been the year of change, and it's not going away anytime soon. I'm then going to come back and talk about the 5 key truths that I've learned about change in the last 25 years. We're then going to talk briefly about how we react to change and then get stuck into a joint discussion on why change fails. Then I'm going to talk about the essential ingredients of sustainable change and end it with a discussion on enabling successful and sustainable change, what we can do with our employers and our clients to enable successful change. Wrap up with 10 minutes of Q&A, and of course we could go over time slightly with that, and any other questions happy to answer afterwards. Now you might be wondering why there's a gold nugget sitting in the corner of this agenda slide. What I'd like you to do is to take a piece of paper like this and write nuggets on the top. In any workshop, in any webinar, in any presentation, if you can just take away 1 or 2 nuggets that you think, oh, I can use that, that's really good, then it's been a valuable use of your time. Hopefully the page will be rather full by the end of today, but 1 or 2 would be great. And at the end of it, I'm wanting us to share, some of us to share as much as we can, what are the nuggets that you've taken away from today, either from the slides that you'll see from me or from some of the excellent comments from your peers. And every time I do one of these, I learn something. I always take away 1, 2, possibly even 3 nuggets from all of you today. So let's get on with the first question, and that is, what have you learned about change these last 12 months? And to do that, I'm going to hand over to Sarah. I need you to log on to Slido and to answer that, and then we're going to discuss what your answers to these questions are. So what have you learned about change these last 12 months? Your ability to lead change, cope with change, accept change, or embrace change. Sarah.
I've activated the question here in shortly, and people can start to populate that with their responses for you.
Fantastic.
Are you seeing the responses, Campbell?
Yeah, they're coming up. Change requires patience. Yes, I agree. Accepting change and embracing change. That we can adapt quickly if we want to. That's a brilliant one. I'm much more resilient than I thought. Thank you. Change can be positive. Yes, it's the only constant. Thank you. Do you know what? What someone said in one of these recently, I've learned that change isn't always bad. And then someone said, that's funny, I've learned that change isn't always good. But they both came together and said, but we need to accept and embrace change, good or bad. And frankly, a lot of change is only good or bad in hindsight. Adaptability required. Yeah, resilience is critical. Change does bring opportunity, but so many people don't actually recognize that or realize that. And they need help to be able to accept uncertainty, accept that change is inevitable, and then look for the opportunities. There is one, I just missed one there that I really liked, which was about change is about people. I agree with you. When I joined Anderson Consulting all those years ago, their focus was on systems and processes, and you need systems and processes to enable change. But if you really want to be successful, change is all about people. I agree with that. Change is inevitable, required. Required change shows our weaknesses. Oh, that's an interesting one. I'd love to have a chat about that. It does. And I call them allowable weaknesses. If we can recognize our allowable weaknesses, none of us are perfect at everything, then we can actually either work out that, find someone to plug those weaknesses, their strengths will plug our weaknesses, or we can actually work to improve on those weaknesses. Change is positive, it certainly can be, but need to understand how it affects people. We're going to cover that. That's fantastic. Flexibility from leadership to embrace change. Gosh, that could be a seminar in its own. That's a wonderful comment that we could all discuss. Flexibility is key. So many leaders believe that they can set a 5-year plan and then do not deviate, and that never works, weirdly enough. So we need flexibility in strategy, flexibility in approach, as long as we know where we're going, which we'll talk about in a second. Change is like jumping into a cold pool. Once you're in, it's fine. Goodness me, do you know what? I've used exactly the same words in the Power to Change. I say, jump in, the water's fine. And it's about confidence to be able to accept uncertainty, embrace change, and leap anyway, even though you don't have all the answers. It's exhausting. I love that. It's exhausting, but possible. It is. Life's exhausting, but possible. And change is a part of life. I really like that. Communication is paramount. We're going to be talking about that. You've learned I can lead and influence change with people I've never met or dealt with face to face. Yes, we have learned that in the last year, haven't we? We really have, that this works. We didn't think this would work, but it does. I'm going to summarize this discussion with I think what we've learned in the last 12 months of change is that we really can change if we need to. It surprised us how much we can change dramatically as long as we have a strong emotional reason for doing so. Now, if you think back 12 months ago when the pandemic first hit and we were all anxious, we all had various degrees of anxiety, but we actually embraced the change of working from home, of locking down, of obeying the rules because we had strong emotional reasons for doing so. We'll talk about that in a second as well. Thank you, Sarah. That's fabulous. Thank you, everyone, for participating in that. I'm sorry I didn't get to read out every comment, but absolutely brilliant. So that set us up nicely for what we are going to discuss today. So I've learned we can cope with big sudden change if we have a strong emotional reason for doing so. Do you know everyone's response to change is different? That's another thing that we've learned in these last 12 months. And actually, our response to change is different when circumstances are different. We can breeze through one change and we find the next one to be really difficult. And the importance of hope and confidence and trust. So change leaders need to engender trust. When we trust our change leaders, when we trust that their interests aligned with our interests, we're there. And mental health matters. That's a wonderful slogan, but I think a lot of change leaders, a lot of business leaders have learned this year that anxiety is not something that happens to other people because they've experienced it themselves. And they've suddenly realized that weirdly, people get anxious when uncertainty is rife, when they don't know what's around the corner. And so therefore helping them to understand that and being empathetic that actually anxiety is a real thing that we need to help people to recover from has been a really big bonus. Empathetic leadership is necessary now. We talked about it 12 months ago. Now people are actually understanding what it is. I'd like to talk to you about the 5 key truths. My last quarter of a century helping organizations, or leading it myself, but to lead change and build cultures that embrace change. I think it'd be distilled down to 5 key things. Firstly, change is inevitable. Now that may sound like a blinding glimpse of the obvious. It's really not. So many people today are waiting for this change to be over so that we can get back to normal. And that's the wrong way to look at it. Change is to be embraced because it's inevitable, it's constant, as Disraeli and a couple of you said, and it's part of life. As soon as we can accept that simple fact, we are a huge step towards being able to embrace change and accept uncertainty, and therefore thrive and be content. So success and contentment arrives from that one little acceptance. The second thing is that all change is personal. Even the most comprehensive of organizational changes is actually the culmination of a myriad of small personal changes, of individual personal changes across the business. And a lot of change leaders forget that. We all erect our own personal barriers to change. It's an evolutionary protection mechanism. We all do it. Some of our barriers last a few seconds, others will last a lifetime. And what I do in the workshops, but in leading change and embracing change workshops, is to help people identify these personal barriers and then help leaders to help their people to overcome them and help people to overcome them themselves. One of the big things I've learned over the last 25 years is that not only that all change is emotional, but emotion trumps logic every single time when it comes to change. And we'll come back to that. But probably the biggest thing is emotions are normal. And once we realize that the emotions we feel when big change is done to us especially are normal, that is another huge step in terms of to be able to accept uncertainty and embrace the change. But you know, probably the most important one is we only change if we want to. We don't change if we're told to. We know that. We don't change if we're told to. We only change if we genuinely want to. And emotions are 4 times more powerful than logic when it comes to change. So to me, leadership, change leadership is about helping people to want to change. Everything I've been preaching about leadership for years boils down to that. It's helping people to want to change, but we can be our own leaders of change. What I put together for the Power to Change, before I wrote the Power to Change, I put this together, but it was published in the Power to Change. It's a simple 2x2 matrix that I think you'll find effective. Very quickly, the y-axis is the size of the change from small to big, but it's the x-axis where the magic lies, and that is the degree of personal control that we have over the change. From none, the change is being done to me, to total, I have complete control over the change, I've instigated it, and it's my baby. So divided into 4 for simplicity's sake. Let's not worry about the first 2. The size of the change is small, or the lower 2, so it's not going to, it's not life or death. You know, we grow with small change I've chosen, or we just simply adapt with small changes that are forced upon me. It's when big change is involved, when dramatic change is involved, is where we really want to concentrate. Now, you will all have heard of the burning platform, obviously of change. Daryl Connor, watching 20 odd years ago, watching the news and saw people leaping off the burning oil rig in the North Sea and thought, there's a burning platform for change. Now, we've all taken that because it's a great image and a great symbolism. We have to create a burning platform for change. We at least have to create a reason for change. I don't think that has to be negative. I think it can be positive as well. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, a positive platform for change is even more sustainable. But that is the quadrant that forests have been felled to write books about. This quadrant over here, the quantum leap quadrant, is big change that I have chosen myself. And just like in the burning platform quadrant, in this quadrant, when we instigate big change, we still undergo an emotional roller coaster. A roller coaster of emotions that we didn't expect. No one talks about that. And in the workshops, I go through the Kubler-Ross change curve, or at least my version of it. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar, and this is an old tool that's been used for decades. Kubler-Ross came up with it in the late 60s. She was a Swiss psychiatrist who in her book on death and dying described the emotions that people go through when they're dying, and also the loved ones who are helping or coping with helping people through this last few moments of their life. And change practitioners like us have taken this and said that applies to big dramatic change as well. So here's the version that I use at the Henley Business School, and it's very powerful to take people through. You'd be surprised at the number of people who haven't seen this before. And one lady who was wiping tears away during the workshop came up to her afterwards and said, "Thank you for describing all of the emotions we go through when big change is done to us. My father died 3 weeks ago, and I thought all these emotions were that I was a loser, that I was being swamped, that I was being weak. I didn't realize they were normal." So obviously we go through that when big change is done to us, and it's a very valuable tool to use. Happy to talk about in great detail in another time. But when we also instigate change, we also go through an emotional roller coaster, which is fascinating. It's when we instigate change as well. And for example, when you promote someone, they will also go through a series of doubt, and anxiety and concern before they come up the other side. And that's something that I think leaders should seek to understand. For the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about the essential ingredients to sustainable change. But first, I want to ask you, and let's do this via Slido, why 88% of change initiatives and business strategies fail. That 88% I got from a Bain & Co. So log on to Slido and tell me why change fails. The 88% I got from Bain & Co. McKinsey says 70, Cotter said 66, but we can all agree that the vast majority of change initiatives and business strategies fail to deliver what they set out to achieve. So if you'd like to log on to Slido, and Sarah, if you'd like to bring the slide up, it will be great to know from you why you think change initiatives fail so frequently. That's a very good point. I forgot to give you the top 10 to pick them. Right, the winner coming in first on the inside rails is poor communications and disingenuous engagement, lack of clarity. Oh, I'm so pleased that emotions are getting a high score, and culture. People don't like change. Is a little bit sneaky. It's an all-encompassing one, isn't it? These are the first 10 chapters in the change catalyst, where we go through why change fails first. Then we turn it around and say, what are the essential ingredients of sustainable change? And when I used to run the first time I ran these workshops, it was all about half an hour on why change fails. And the first couple of times people came up and said, that's really useful, but quite depressing. Couldn't you switch it around? So we've done it like this from then on. Thank you. I'm getting a really good sense of that. Communications and engagement, 73%. What a great group this is. That is so true. And communications is two-way. Communications is not telling, it's listening, as we will discuss. Lack of clarity, and forget that emotions trump logic every time. They're all important, but those top three come out really well. Thank you so much. Let's crack on. So choose three from that list, which you've done. Now I want to turn it around, knowing that engagement, clarity, and communication and emotions are important. Let's look at what are the essential ingredients of successful change, and spend 15 minutes going through that. I hope you're going to have your nuggets page ready. Here we go. Let's get stuck into it. Number one in my book, well, of the list anyway, is a clarity of what we're trying to achieve and why. It's so crucial. But let me unpack that for you, because everybody knows that. It's a blinding glimpse of the obvious is the headline. But let's get through underneath that. We need to clarify the business outcomes and never lose sight of them. But there's more to this page or to that headline than meets the eye, because clarity of what we're trying to achieve is both the numbers. That's the easy bit, isn't it? In every business, it's, oh, we're going to double the size of the business, triple the profit, we're going to reduce headcount by X. It's all numbers. That's the easy bit. We also need the narrative, because if people are going to have any chance of achieving what we need to achieve or what we need them to achieve, we need to remember that emotion trumps logic every time. Therefore, people need a narrative on what kind of business we are going to turn into, what's going to be different in the new world, what kind of department, how are we going to change? Then we need to understand why. So what needs the numbers and the narrative, and why needs the logic, which most change leaders use, but it also needs the emotions. We need to understand if we want people to engage in this change, to really embrace in this change, it's not just the logic to say if we don't change, we're going to lose market share, or if we don't change, we're going to go out of business, or, you know, that's the logic. But is the emotions. We can become, it's wonderful. It's going to be great for your career. It's going to be brilliant for your status, your identity. Together, we're going to build the best business in the world, or the department. We're going to award-winning department. Whatever it is, it needs to be numbers and narrative and logic and emotions. Don't forget both of those, or all four of them really. And to delve a little bit deeper as well, What I also say to leaders, and that can be leaders of departments, leaders of teams, or leaders of businesses, is that be very clear on what your purpose is. For a business, it's be very clear on why you exist and for whom, and be very clear on what is it that makes you special. And we'll come to that in a second. And also what gives you the right to be successful in the future. But that works for departments and for teams just as well as it does for businesses. Why is your team? Why does your team exist? And for whom does it exist to serve? What makes you special and what gives you the right to be successful? If you help your leaders to answer those questions, suddenly so much will be clear. Also magic, you've probably heard this before, but in any change, we're going from the as is to the to be. What's the magic we want to retain? Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. What's the magic of the way we work today that we really don't want to get rid of because we are brilliant at it, and it doubles in, as I said, it reflects, it just goes one little bit further than the purpose. The other two things that I recommend you help your change leaders in the organization to do is identify the sacred cows. What are those things we're just not questioning? Is it an IT system we always use? It is a methodology we always use. What is those things we're just not questioning? And then the elephants, what are those questions that everybody knows that no one's asking? One of my US clients, who's a wonderfully brash and confident CEO, who says, there aren't the elephants in my company, Campbell. I'm the first one to get them out on the table. That's great, and he was telling the truth. I've seen him in action, but we also need to do that in help our leaders to do that themselves. Let's get the elephants out on the table. So that's clarity, what we're trying to achieve and why. The other one that you did also voted for, and this is so critical, it's tied up with emotions, it's tied up with communication, is ensure the implications are fully understood. One of my clients, the CEO brought me in and said, Cam, I want you to, I've got my strategy, and I want you to do your workshops and get everyone bought into my strategy, of which I sort of put my head in my hands and went, really? I know what you mean, but it can't just be your strategy. And have you unearthed the challenges, the obstacles, the fears that are in, the implications, the consequences that are in everybody's heads? And he said, no. I said, that's the first thing we're going to do. So we got the top 80 people from the business all in one big room. It was a few years ago, all in one big room. The CEO stood up and gave his strategy, which was really just a destination, double the size of the business, triple the profit, but still it was the strategy. And then I stood up and said, right, now that Martin said all those things, every single one of you going through your head are concerns, are implications, are consequences, are reasons why that will be challenging, reasons why it can't be done, wondering if he's thought of are we having to move locations, are we going to change our IT systems, are we going to all sorts of issues and obstacles are inside your heads. And they all sort of grinned and laughed. I said, let's get them out on the table. So we did that. We had flip charts going all around the room. We then prioritized them, and then we all worked together in the afternoon to start to work out how we were going to overcome them. So that by the end of the day, literally the end of the day, everyone was going, you know what, we can double the size of this business, because they had an opportunity to get their concerns out on the table and understand what the implications of the strategy actually were. Then we come to the big one, as you said, genuine communications and engagement. It's tied into the last one. And this is a great book that I use to help leadership teams to form close leadership teams together. But genuine communications and engagement requires listening. How many times have we seen people go around with a little checklist, change managers or change leaders go around with a checklist, and they're just not listening? So to me, genuine communications and genuine engagement is about listening and truly understanding what your people want, what your people fear, what the implications of the strategy of the new change actually is. Because I love this bumper sticker, but the biggest communication problem we really have is that we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply, and it's up to us, to you and I, to work with our clients and our employees to switch that around, to start listening to understand, rather than, I do it all the time, jumping in with an opinion, rather than sitting back and listening to understand where the person's coming from. And I think that's one of the big reasons you said it was the #1 reason, one of the big reasons why change has such a wonderful failure rate. The other thing is to remember that emotions trump logic every time. There was a wonderful survey done back in 2004 by the Corporate Leadership Council, who surveyed 50,000 employees worldwide, and they found several things, and you can have a look on the newsletter and blog section on my website for a summary of it. But the big thing they came up with was emotion is 4 times more powerful than logic when it comes to change and when it comes to employee engagement. And we know that. As agents of change in organizations, we know that people don't just go along because it's logical. We know that they need to be fired up emotionally. And the biggest source of the emotion, two biggest source of the emotion or engagement is clarity of what we're trying to achieve and why. And the other thing that this survey found is that the line manager is the second biggest source of engagement and commitment to the change. So that's why we need to help leaders across the organization to be better leaders of change and to be more empathetic leaders. What we also need to do, because emotion trumps logic every time, is to find out people's emotional triggers. And you know what? This goes for us as well, to help ourselves, if we want to embrace change, to help ourselves find our emotional triggers. We know ourselves better than anyone. But as leaders and managers, I help people to say, how do you want your people to feel about this change? What is important to them? What gets them excited about the future? And you can see with these questions, leaders and managers start to become empathetic leaders and managers without telling them to. What makes them feel good about themselves, your people, and what motivates them? And of course, we can switch that around to ourselves as well. When it comes to emotions, there's another little piece of work, of research that I've talked about in both books, is a Portuguese neuroscientist that now works in the States called Professor Dalmacio. He did a research on people whose parts of their brain had been damaged, all were born that way. And the brain damage was not discernible apart from the fact that they couldn't feel emotions. They were all like Spock of Star Trek. And a fascinating side effect is that they also couldn't make decisions, because you need emotions to make decisions. Even the most logical among us, and we're particularly on this call, we're all logical people, is that we need a bit of emotion to make decisions. These people couldn't actually decide what to eat or what to wear. You know, what to eat. Well, I want 2 portions of carbohydrate and 3 portions of protein. It just doesn't work that way, does it? And what to wear? Well, if you can't have a gut feel about emotions, you don't know what to wear today. So fascinating is that emotions actually drive our decision making as well. And yet too often when it comes to change particularly, or leading people, we push emotions to the side, and we really can't if we want to be successful. The 5th out of 10 is this: to focus on outcomes. What you and I do, what you do particularly, is to set a brilliant methodology and a brilliant process to be able to deliver the change, and that's critical. Process and methodology are critical enablers. But how many times have we seen, we set up the process, we set up the methodology, and the change, and still the change doesn't get delivered because the leadership, the business leadership, take their eye off the ball. The business leaderships aren't continually focused on outcomes, and focusing on outcomes is critical. I went into a program office once. I was sent in by the CEO many years ago to say, could you just help us work out why nothing gets delivered from this incredibly efficient program office that seems to be doing all the right things? And the reason was no one was focused on the outcomes, obsessed with, I think, on the outcomes. And that boils over to inertia, because what we have to do is to overcome inertia. Obviously, initially inertia, it's hard enough to finish a plan, let alone start to get it into action. But the one that you and I see all the time is midterm inertia. Any IT project, for goodness sakes, gets a momentum all of its own, as I'm not telling you anything you don't know, and it's like a locomotive running down the track. And it's almost politically impossible to jump out in front of that locomotive and go, stop. Should we really be heading in this direction? And what are we doing in a train anyway? But that's what we need to do. I've seen time and time again, big IT projects, 5 times, 10 times the budget, 5 times, 10 times the length. And sometimes, as I've seen, they get scrapped after spending so much money. What we have to do is to convince everybody in the business that this is just a phenomena that happens to big projects. It's not weakness. It's not politically wrong to be doing this. What we need to do is to build pauses for reflection into our methodology. Now, most of the methodologies, the change management methodologies, have these pauses for reflection. Prince 2 does, but business owners just seem to think that's a project management methodology thing. It's not. It's a business thing. We need to stop, remove the blame, remove the politics, and pause and say, are the outcomes we want to achieve still valid? Is the way that we're achieving them still valid? And the answer can be no to both of those. Are we still on the right track? And the answer can politically be no to that as well. And then we can pause and tack and move on. That requires leadership who realize this is a phenomenon. It's not play the blame game, and it's not about politics. Now, that's easier to say than do, but that's one of the things that help leaders take the blame and politics out of it. The other third part of inertia is complacency. I mean, complacency is a disease that infects the successful. And we need to root out complacency throughout the organization. What leaders of change need to do, which you do for them, is to set them up to succeed. The right methodology, not if Prince 2 is the right thing. What was the question? Prince 2 is great for big organization, big changes. What's needed for the small one? We need to make sure the governance, the accountability, the responsibilities are all crystal clear and appropriate for the culture and for the size of the change. Let's set our people up to succeed. We also have to build a change-ready and enabling culture. That is critical. That's why I put together, well, the Power to Change and the Embracing Change workshops. It's about creating a change-ready and enabling culture. If our people aren't ready, willing, and able to embrace change, nothing's going to happen. So I've got a few questions that you can use in your organization for yourself or to help your business leaders or business owners, your managers, your leaders at all stages of the organization to ask this question. Are your people, or are their people, encouraged to question the status quo? Do they continually look to improve the way things are done? And the flip side, are they open to new ways of working? And are they encouraged to learn from failure? Now, failure, I don't like that word. Ritz-Carlton banned it from their lexicon, and they can only use glitches, which I think made me laugh, but I know what they're trying to achieve. Are they encouraged to learn from setbacks? Would be better, from glitches. Is everyone's behavior aligned to deliver the strategy? And more importantly, is yours? And this is what I help leaders to work out. Number 9 is a change catalyst to drive delivery. When I wrote the book, I was thinking alongside every project manager, we need a change catalyst because they're different skill sets. And sometimes that's true. And some organizations have taken this chapter and just written up a role profile for it. But let me talk you through the logic and then where my thoughts have changed. To me, a change catalyst is someone who really understands the business, who's obsessed with outcomes, who is great at communicating, brilliant with stakeholders and understands the value and all of that, who listens to understand, it's almost like a mythical beast, but works with the project and program manager is the yin to a PM's yang. I've changed the way that I think sometimes you do need someone. All leaders of change should be change catalysts, but I think PMs can be change catalysts as well. Even though it's a different skill set, I think that we can all appreciate process and we can all appreciate our outcomes, but possibly working together. This is how PMs and business leads, if you like, or sponsors should work together. But we can all be catalysts for change. And actually, we can be our own change leaders as well to help ourselves embrace change. And the 10th is committed leadership. Change leaders at all levels of organization cannot take their eye off the ball when it comes to change. A lot of leaders go, great, that change project's up and running, I can go and do something else. They can't. We can't take their eyes off the change ball because the forces against change, the entropy, if you like, out there in the universe is against change, and we need to remain committed to seeing the change through, and we need to help our change leaders to remain committed to seeing it through and to realize the benefits. Change is not a project. Change is not a short-term thing. Change is a way of life. So the initiative we're working on now, we need to see it through to deliver the outcomes and then work on continuous improvement, because that's what change is really all about. Now, the top 10, the first 10 chapters of the Change Catalyst. Interestingly, what I just said before then, I think is an 11th reason, is treating change like a project, only like a project, is also a recipe for disaster, because change isn't something that ends. We need a project, particularly with culture change. We need to treat that like a project, but actually realizing that a project will deliver outcomes. Great. Now, what's next? Change is a part of life. We need to help our leaders lead in a world of change. And of course, we could talk about VUCA forever, but we need to particularly accept uncertainty as humans and as leaders and as managers and as enablers of change. To me, leadership is all about leading change. If you're not leading change, then you're not leading anything. You're just managing the status quo. So having heard me ramble for the last half hour, I'd like to ask you, let's go to Slido, and I'd like, in your experience, because you've dealt with change leaders, good, bad, and ugly and indifferent, all throughout your career, what are the attributes you've seen in an excellent leader of change? And I'll hand over the control to Sarah to bring Slido up. We've seen leaders of change, the good, the bad, the indifferent. What are the attributes that you've seen as excellent leaders of change? Walk in others' shoes, authenticity, empathy, understanding. Whoa, inspiring is coming out big. I love this part of Slido. I think it's brilliant. Visionary. I'm so pleased empathy is coming out. Passionate. Passion. Passion is something that is good. A listener. Focused. Engagement at all levels. Confident. Thank you so much for everyone for getting engaged in this. This is brilliant. Listen to understand. Skin in the game. Skin in the game. That's a really, really good one. Yeah, people who care. I'd even say care, frankly. It's got to be that. That would be, care is the thing that wraps around it. Referee, whoever said that, well done. You're right. A change leader is a good referee. But remember, as far as I'm concerned, leadership is about leading change. So it's not like, oh, you're a change leader today. No, 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 no. What do you mean? You are. If you're a leader, you're a change leader. And leadership is all about helping our people to want to change. They make you see what they see. That's brilliant. Thank you. I think I might use that one. Simple messaging layman can understand. Yeah, but that's about good communication, isn't it? That's about actually putting it in words and emotions and feelings and context that people will not only understand, but actually then get engaged with. Thank you so much. Good empathy, visionary, passionate, listener, willing. Oh, I like that, just willing. Vulnerability, right? Thank you. Inspirational. Delivery. Oh, University of Life, that's good. Delivery. Actually, someone that is able to be vulnerable. Right, thank you so much. Thank you, that's brilliant. So, Sarah, can you see the slides? No, there they are. Show my screen, that will work. So thank you for that. Now, here's my top 13. I just did a workshop with the police yesterday, one of the many police forces, and they asked for this slide to sort of put on their wall, frankly, which was flattering. To me, great leaders are great change leaders. They are trusted. They are trusted. Gosh, you just pause for effect there. Trust is so important in a leader, and to do that, you need to gain people's trust. You need to put yourselves in people's shoes, as you said. You need to be visionary. You need to be passionate. You need to be credible. You need to be authentic. You need to be empathetic. Great leaders are trusted. Great leaders like people. They also like themselves. empathetic, as you said, they also build extraordinary leadership teams. So I help clients to do that, because if you've got a great CEO as a leader, or if you've got a great department head as a leader, or a team head as a leader, they aren't going to achieve anywhere near as much. In fact, they will achieve probably nothing unless they have they are part of an extraordinary leadership team that is working together, based on trust and shared outcomes to deliver things. Great leaders create more leaders. Ralph Nader said this: leaders create more leaders, not followers. And that is so true. Great leaders enable their people to shine. Here's a little nugget I really want to share with you. They embrace stewardship. A company that I had the pleasure of meeting in Boston, that has thousands of employees around the world. This is one of their foundation principles: stewardship. Every single person in the business, every leader, whether it's the CEO or managing partner, in this case, department leader, team leader, everyone strives to leave their part of the business in a better state than when they found it. And I find it very hard to find a principle that is better for leadership and management than that. Great leaders like Jacinda Ardern combine humility with confidence. In fact, she said humility is strength. And there's my Australian accent coming out. Humility is strength. And good leaders are confident, but they're humble. They know they don't have all the answers. And they also know they shouldn't be expected to. No one else expects them to, so why would they? They change their minds when a better solution arises or facts change. Goodness me, imagine a leader doing the opposite. Obviously, in the world of politics, they do that all the time. But imagine a leader. Imagine, no, I'm a really strong leader because I don't change my mind, even though the facts have changed. That's nonsense, isn't it? Great leaders share the credit and take the blame. They're authentic, they're genuine, but they deliver results. For goodness sakes, leadership is not a popularity context. It's about engaging people. It's about a clear strategy, understanding the implications, execution. Strategy is about execution just as much as planning. And through their leadership team, their culture, and their people, they deliver results. So given that's the body of the presentation today, as it's coming up to 20 past. I just want to ask you one last question, and then we'll go to a big Q&A. Is, given everything that we've discussed today, and it's been a roller coaster ride, or it's been a whirlwind stop. There's some words there. Whistle stop tour, that's what I was looking for. As a PM, what do you think you can do, given the thoughts of today and the nuggets you've written down? What do you think you could do beyond what you're doing today to enable successful and sustainable change in your business? Let's go to slide over that last question. What can you do to enable successful and sustainable change? Develop my EQ, consider emotions, really listen to people. Spend time to understand and get on board with the change yourself first. Yes. Be more passionate like you. That's just showing off. Think beyond the bounds of the project to understand broader implications. That's fantastic. Brilliant thing to do that, because you've got to have the context of the broader, what's the business trying to achieve, and making it real for your team. Listen more, talk less. Engage early on with colleagues who are immediately effective. Yeah, do you know what? We all do stakeholder analysis and impact assessment, but it's actually bringing that to life that is important. Favor emotions over logic. I'd say just understand that emotions are powerful and harness them. Support change through the change process. Bring people with you, yes. Be more positive, yeah, but it's a positivity based on reality, based on an understanding of the strengths and of the reasons for the why we're going to be successful. It's positivity without, it's like trust. Without, if it's not based on reality, if it's not based on a real foundation, then it's political trust. It's political positivity. It's empty. We need positive thinking, passion, commitment based on a genuine understanding of our strengths, genuine understanding of why we exist and for whom, on what makes us special, and what gives us the reasons, the belief, the right to think that we're going to be successful with this change. Build trust. Thank you. Get buy-in from others is critical, and that's up and across the organization. I think a key role of a PM, we'll get to that in a sec, is to enable the leaders to be successful. And it's enable the people to be successful, therefore to enable the change to be successful. Sometimes you're leading horses to water who just don't drink or don't know how to drink, and that's where I think, you know, maybe we could work together to make that a reality. Be compassionate, to understand the person of you, be honest and sincere. Involve all levels in the change completely and ensure they feel involved. That's it. That is exactly it. It's about, you can't get commitment by just being passionate at people. Understand the human impact of change. All change is about people. Ignore senior management. Love it. Absolutely love it. I agree. Yeah. They only get in the way. So many times I've been brought in to do workshops and webinars, and the exec team will say, but we don't need it, obviously, but everyone else in the organization needs to learn how to lead change. After the first couple, the exec team then says, do you think we could do a more senior, more advanced version of your leading change program? Because I think we could probably do with some of that as well. Be more Campbell. Oh gosh, no, I don't think you need more of those, but you're very sweet, very kind. Okay, here's what I was hoping you would say, but what the dickens. My belief with you, with your critical role in being the change agents, change catalysts of the organization, is you please help your leaders to become better change leaders, because if they're not, it ain't going to be successful. They're going to be the 1 in 8 that doesn't succeed, and they're going to run away from any change program in the future. I believe you need to become their informal coach, whether they realize you're doing this or not. Help them to succeed. As I said before, focus on the 10 essential ingredients of successful change. Help them to fully appreciate that change is about people, and if they don't engage people, that sounds lame. It's about people. If they don't look at the 10 essential ingredients of successful change, then they're not going to be successful. Help the leaders also to create a change-ready culture and help everyone to enhance their ability to embrace change. So it's time for nuggets. I'd like you to think through, what will you do differently today, after today? What will you do differently? And what are some of the nuggets that you've shared, and put these in your chat now, in the chat session. What are some of the nuggets you've taken away today? And I think you've mentioned a few in the last Slido session. What are some of the nuggets, and what are you going to do differently after today? That's what I need you to ask yourselves. So please put those in the chat, and any questions you've got for me, feel free to fire away for the next 5 minutes, and then we can run over time a little bit if we want to. But you've already had some good, not just questions, but some great comments in the Slido section and the chat sessions. Any questions you've got, any nuggets you'd like to share, throw them in the chat.
We've got a few questions already, Campbell, that have come through in Slido, actually.
Oh, good.
How do you convince someone that it's not the blame game if change is needed? This is from Sharon. I think this was based on stopping a change that's going in the wrong direction, potentially.
Well, you've got to convince people as high up as possible, because it's only when someone's boss and their boss's boss will come out and say, this isn't about blame, this is about doing the right thing, this is a phenomenon. So you really need to teach the leaders that this is a normal phenomenon when it comes to change. It happens everywhere, and it happens 7 times out of 8 in large change things. So it's about working with the leaders, managers, and the managers, and getting them to understand and appreciate that this isn't about blame. And then even if you can get 50% of the way with that one, at least to say, and by the way, blaming won't move us forward in the direction anyway, because we won't have learned anything. A number of times that we wrap up change projects and we don't learn sausage, because all we really want to do is to, blame the guilty, protect the innocent, and move on. and it's about educating leaders.
Okay, great. Another question from Raj. Would a stoic approach be beneficial for effective change?
A stoic approach. I don't prescribe that that resilience is about stoicism. I know that that's a very quick synonym. Stoicism is about keeping calm and carrying on. To me, building resilience, therefore the ability to change, is about understanding that we do go through emotions when big change is done to us. Those emotions are okay. To be stepping back from those emotions and detaching ourselves from them and then working through them, I think, is a more sustainable form of stoicism. In the past, the previous generations were very stoic, and I think the mental health issues that came out of that were quite profound, but just never discussed.
Okay. I mean, everyone's putting things
Yeah,
now
some really good comments in the chat. Really good comments.
We got another question. Trust and empathy are big leadership traits, but why are we seeing such attraction to leaders driving by instinct? For example, Trump.
Yeah. Gosh, that's another hour in itself. I try and unpack that to a tiny degree in both books. I'm flummoxed by that, and I think it's through fear. Well, it's both fear and hope. The best way to get elected in any democracy is stoke the fears of either others or of dangers of change, and also to give false hope. And then to wrap that in the flag of patriotism or nationalism. So if you do all those things, you're almost certainly going to get elected, which is really sad, to be perfectly honest. But what we can, it's really working out what we can actually influence. So what we can influence at work is to learn from that and to give people hope based on a fundamental understanding, based on strength, a hope that is real, not false, and to reduce the fears, to not play on them. So there's no way that I can change the world. I've stopped tweeting as though I can, but let's work out what I can help to change.
Okay, I think that's all that I've got on here, other than what's coming through on the Slido feed.
Great nuggets coming through on Slido, that I'm sort of down. Don't allow hippos. Come on, Donna, what's a hippo?
Hippo. Wallowing, I'm guessing.
Do you know what? I'm not sure it is, but I like it. Do you know what? When you get to the bottom of the change curve, as you all will have known, we do wallow at the bottom. We can be actual clinical depression, or it could just be feeling down, or it could just be wallowing. And that's normal. But what we need to do is to look ourselves in the mirror and say, yes, this has been unfair. Yes, I've been poorly treated. I didn't deserve any of this. It's unfair and I feel down. But then what we need to do is to ask ourselves, so what are we going to do about it?
It's not actually hippo, it's highest paid person's opinion.
Well, thanks for the wallowing bit anyway. Highest paid opinion.
I've never heard that. I've never heard that before.
I know, I really like it. There's one of my nuggets, a hippo. Highest paid opinion. Yeah, that's you've flummoxed me, not stomached me, with that one. How to avoid that? Well, increase your daily rate, and then you'll be the highest paid opinion.
I'm seeing one question, Campbell. We're nearly out of time, but one question is, how can you start to gently break down the culture of resistance to change? I often struggle because the barriers are up before I can clarify implications.
I agree, and the first step is to understand why that exists, and it requires an enlightened CEO to do that. So either enlighten the CEO or the leader, or find one that is enlightened. But first of all, why these barriers exist? That's the first question. Find out why. Talk to people. Understand what are their fears. Literally, what are you afraid of? You know, what are the fears of this change? And they're genuine. So if you get those out on the table, suddenly getting them out on the table will diminish them, and then you can work to overcome them. One of the CEOs, in fact, in the office, I'm sitting in here at the moment because at home I've got builders coming in to the home office. They ran embracing change workshops throughout the organization that was just for everyone to help them to be able to accept uncertainty and embrace change, not for any particular, well, yes, it was a business reason that we need to change, we have a particular change going on, but change is inevitable, as you all said, and complacent. So it's, and not complacent, and constant. So that helps, but getting them to realize that this culture exists, number one, and two, to explore, really understand why, and that's step two. But first, the leader's got to care and understand that it is critical that they have a change-ready culture. And as I said in the sales pitch right up front, hey, let's work together and help your employees and clients to actually be able to do this.
Right, thank you.
The nuggets that have been coming through will be brilliant. So just sorry to talk over you, Sarah. Thank you for
absolutely, yeah,
brilliant, absolutely.
So it really just leaves me to say thank you so much, Campbell and Donna, for today. It's been a really fascinating session and presentation, so thank you for that. And thank you for everyone for attending. I'll finish off today. Everyone have a good afternoon, and thank you again. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Campbell.
Bye.